The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. There's still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, the group would just jump in and help out. It was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kīlauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? It was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dane started coming to you and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed and we knew we were getting to the local community and people were asking questions. So those were the best, I think. I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally got.
Aloha everyone, I'm geologist Philip Ong, here with Mr. Dan DuPont from a nonprofit HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute. Today is Thursday, February 20th, 2025. Kīlauea has erupted its summit episode number 10. It began last night and ended earlier this morning. So we will cover that today and some of the other events happening around our community. How are you doing today, Dane? How was your last week?
Doing good. How about yourself? A lot of action last night.
Yeah, exciting night on a volcano.
Yeah,
Short and quick.
got a
this
lot
one.
of different posts made on Tracker and stuff like that. So if you had missed them, Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group, where a lot of people are that are going up there sharing their images. And we always like to encourage and thank them.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, for sure. There's some great views there. We're just going to share the USGS stuff today and try to see if we can trim a little bit here off the end, since there's so much more to navigate out there.
Right.
All right. So anything else before we get going, Dane?
If you got any questions about the eruption or what's going on up on Kīlauea, feel free to drop them in the chat and we will get to them in our Q&A.
Sounds good. Thanks for leading that discussion in the chat there.
Yeah.
All right. Let's rearrange our screen here and get ready for our Hawaiian volcano summary. Aloha, everyone. This is our Hawaiian volcano summary for February 20th, 2025. The last week was fairly quiet as Kīlauea built up to its 10th episode of its summit eruption, which began last night, lasted 13 hours, and ended this morning. The fountains once again were quite high, reaching close to the top of the upper rim, 300 to 400 feet or 125 meters high. And the flows that resulted from that have covered about 3/4 of the crater floor. And so here, this view you're seeing is the live camera, the V1, looped over those 13 hours of eruption. And here we have the S2 camera showing that north vent reactivating, the south vent glowing persistently throughout the eruption, but not erupting itself in this latest episode. Here's a wider view of the entire crater floor, where you can see the flows snaking their way across and covering that 3/4 area of the inner crater of Halemaʻumaʻu. And a similar view on a thermal shows an outburst coming from the right with taller fountains, feeding a series of flows that, once the fountains shut off, begin to overturn and leak lava still at this moment. Now, this is all located within Kīlauea caldera. This February 7th map during a pause shows the location of the vents here in the southwest corner. And so it's within this pit the lava is flowing, and thus it's not threatening any infrastructure since it sits within this depression at the summit. Here's the ground tilt for the past month on Kīlauea. The blue line at the summit, the green line on the rift zone. The rift zone has been deflating, not feeling much of the summit activity. But the summit has been inflating and charging up, and each episode has relieved pressure, causing it to deflate. And so you see this pattern of episode 5, episode 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So here's the last week of fairly quiet on the volcano, and our episode 10 that deflated the volcano and has since begun recharging the volcano here. So this rate over the first 6 hours of pause was about 1 microradian. And you can see that overall, the magnitude of our drop was not as large as the most recent episodes. So while it's too soon to put a forecast on exactly when the next episode might occur, you would suspect it could be sooner than later, given the short drop here and pattern with the previous episodes as well. And along those lines, we can look at the chart of episodes here, and we can actually divide them. All the ones that are 15 hours or under have been followed by a pause that is no longer than 2 days. Here's a couple more. While all the ones that are 16 hours or over have been followed by at least 4 days of pause before the next eruption episode comes on. So that's not binding, of course, but that would lead you to believe that on a shorter end of the time frame would be the next episode onset. The short episode has helped produce less fog, as it's putting out that high output of gas for less time. However, that's still blowing across the island This time with a typical trade wind pattern blowing to the southwest across the Kau Desert, and then getting caught in this gyre that affects the Kona coast of Hawaii Island here. For the most part, everything is blowing offshore with this pattern, which has kept the Hilo side fairly in the clear, unlike some earlier episodes. Here you can see the purple air monitors showing current conditions with impacts, especially from Kailua, Kona town, and south at present moment. Moving to Mauna Loa, it's been fairly quiet earthquake-wise at the summit. Here's these very few 18 events. This falls within this long-term pattern of low earthquakes each month ever since the 2022 eruption. So here we are in that pattern, still recharging the volcano. And you can see that through this vertical GPS station component at the summit of Mauna Loa. So it's been going up, sometimes a little slower, sometimes a little faster, with some noise in there, but overall has been rising. If anything, we can zoom into this right-hand part of the graph here where we can see from perhaps the start of February or later in January, we maybe have a slight increase in the rate of uplift coming up here. But as we just showed you with the earthquakes, this is happening without much seismicity. So for now, this is a sign of the pulse of the volcano that it is filling and continuing to swell within, but not enough to cause stresses and earthquakes. Here are the earthquakes for the whole last month. You can see they're still not accumulating in any great number or in any location. And perhaps if we look at the earthquake depths over the past year at Mauna Loa, we can see that occasionally we have these deeper earthquakes that potentially may be connected to magma injection into the volcano above and causing this long-term filling and extension. So we had some of those that appear within the last month here. Perhaps there's something similar going on. In any case, it's nothing, no cause for alarm, and nothing that looks to escalate anytime soon. And that's our Hawaii volcano summary for this week. So we'll move on to our hazard summary, looking into the gas, which is our main hazard for people at this point in time. As usual, we're leaning on VMAP, VOG Measurement and Prediction Project from University of Hawaii in Manoa. And the VOG forecast we showed you looks like this. You can see here all this stuff blowing offshore, and this gyre here that brings that VOG here onto the onshore part. We usually just flash through this VOG forecast, showing you guys the SO2. The SO2 is the pure form of the gas when it comes out of the volcano. But what happens is as it flies through the atmosphere, it reacts with the sunlight and moisture in the air, and that produces these sulfate particles. So we can click over here to this sulfate button. It actually will show us more of that particulate matter. And you can see here how it has a little bit more impact in the later time periods in the Kona coast. So that's the forecast there. It might persist for a little while given this, but it's been fairly clear for Hilo recently. For our interactive maps, let's come here to the state map and show you guys. On the state map, it looks pretty clear across most of the islands. So we can get more resolution with this purple air. So let me see if I can, first let's zoom it out to the state level and just show you guys what that looks like. We do have sometimes these higher numbers coming up on Oahu where you have just more infrastructure, more particles in the air. You can see that in previous of our episodes, we've discussed impacts to Maui with the winds being southerly. That does not seem to be occurring this time around. And you can see that presently there seems to be this green swath from volcano to the southwest, and really the effect is concentrated here on the Kona side. We can examine this a little more closely. I can click on one of these, for example. Let's see, what is that one? Wood Valley. And here, let's see if that'll let me zoom into that anymore. There we go. So here you can see that just before midnight on the 20th February, last night, you can only see this increase in PM 2.5, one little bump, and then a much steeper climb right here. So you can imagine this must be that plume of gas actually reaching the Wood Valley area. And you can see that this morning, after the eruption was over, it dropped off fairly quickly as well. And so it did get up into the yellow here, did not quite get to the orange, but it was short-lived and currently seems to be past in that area. Kona side is not quite as lucky since you do have that gyre that pulls the VOG onto this onshore area. So there the pattern is not quite as clear. I can pick one of these stations in here and they usually look fairly messy. You see it comes in and out over the course of the day. It may have more to do with the onshore and offshore winds and those patterns than the actual pulses of the volcano once it gets caught in that gyre over there. So that's purple air. We like to show windy as well. So I'm going to pull out windy, and here is the SO2 layer. Here you can see the impact of our recent emissions contributing to the global flow there. And I also like to come to the mounts page, which is capturing these satellite snapshots of SO2. So the most recent one is not recent enough to actually catch our current output, but we can show you guys going back. Here's a 15th, a couple of shots from the 15th in the background. And there's a 12th, that was episode 9, showing you. There's probably the first part of it and the second part. So together, those two showing a similar pattern of westward dispersal of this gas to the Kona coast and offshore as well. So, and in contrast, and come back to episode 8, which was back on the 5th. Here it is. As a reminder, that's when we had our south winds and we had the VOG affecting east to west across all of Hawaii Island and going on to Maui as well. So that's the contrast that I've been talking about here. Closer to the source, they're in a national park. You can see that it's following a similar pattern around the crater. It's all in a green presently. But down to the southwest by Kahuku, we have one point there in the orange. So let's come to the history and show you the charts. SO2 on the left and particulate matter here on the right. And everything's in the green until you get to the Kahuku. Kahuku SO2 being high this morning, starting at, looks like 12:45 a.m. or so, 1 a.m. And the particulate matter around 3 a.m. also reaching into the yellow there. Everything else is in the clear. So if you do have respiratory sensitivities, you certainly want to follow park guidance if you're nearby the eruption site. It's putting out most of that gas during eruptions, but there is some amount coming out in the background between eruptions during the pauses as well. So depending how sensitive you are, you want to take the proper precautions. So that is our hazard summary, which is all about the gas, which is great. If it's just the gas, we have to worry about, and Pele's hairs and that thing, and not so much lava flows or other earthquakes or that kind of thing. So let's look at recent earthquakes. Earthquakes have actually been a little quieter throughout all its activity here in Kīlauea. Here are the last 2 weeks showing 54 earthquakes across the whole map. See, so there's some background ones of settling earthquakes offshore, including ones that you guys talked about last week. There and there. And we still have our Deep Pahala sector earthquakes ongoing. There's a few here in Mauna Loa on its east flank. Maybe that relates a little bit to this extra injection of material that we may be witnessing on GPS. Kīlauea Summit's pretty quiet, and you see the whole south flank for 2 weeks is pretty quiet there as well. So as we like to do, we'll come to the earthquakes plotted by size. Right, this is over the last 7 days now. So in that range, we've had 4 magnitude 3s to 4. 3 of those 4 have been down offshore in this Pahala zone. There's a 3.1, a 3.5, and a 3.8, all within that little cluster right in there. 3.8, 3.5, and 3.1. And then this 3.3 settling earthquake off here to the northwest. So nothing much to speak of there. It's the same pattern as before, and the numbers may be slightly less, but hard to measure that just by eye. And it looks a little different. USGS is working in our background right now, so that's what's going on with the map display. So we'll move on from the earthquakes to our monitoring. And we'll start off up here at the top, looking at the last week of data. So to start, the summit elevation is detecting, that laser rangefinder is detecting the accumulation of lava flows in that western part of the crater. We have some noise in the graph, so it's hard to see very much detail how much that actually is, but you can see here we've not reached 960 meters, and we probably started off at somewhere in the range of 950 to 955, somewhere in there. So you could say that on the order of a few meters or 10, 15 feet, something like that might be more or less the ballpark of lava flows you've accumulated in this one area. And we'll look for more detailed information as it's available here. The earthquakes, you can see match the tilt a bit. So here's the last week of earthquakes. You have to ignore the partial days on either end because they're not capturing a full 24 hours compared to the other days in here. But you can see that the earthquake rates do decrease even with this partial day here, coincident with our eruption onset of episode 10 here, right here. There's a little more interesting things to look at on a tilt graph this week. One thing to note is that it really divides into two halves. You can see the first half of the week up until right before midnight on the 17th. You're having a fairly decent rate of inflation there. And then something happens here on that evening of between the 16th and 17th, and you have a much flatter rate of inflation for the second half of the week. That changed yesterday in the day when that rate then increased once again, leading to the onset of episode 10 right here. So that's one interesting thing. The USGS updates actually mentions long period tremor that occurs during this interval, and they suggest it might be linked to some changes in the magma conduit. Maybe some magma moving around or gases reorganizing within there with the magma. Something that was able to cause this temporary relief of pressure that lasted about that long, and once it began again, then that was it. The system broke to release the gas and lava. So that's one interesting thing there. There's another interesting thing here. It's a little more subtle, and this will require more observation and examination over time. But you might notice that, so these lines here that are dashed indicate midnight for each day. And right in the center, in between those, right around noon, in each one of these days, you're getting a little bit of this extra signal coming in every single day in that daytime hour, right? So it looks there's a little bit of other signal coming in here, and it's not clear if this is exactly like a tidal thing or a temperature thing, but there is some other noise embedded in here as well that we're not used to seeing as much on this signal of UWD. But it's interesting to note that you actually can see when it comes up there, then it kind of resumes a path, and that one's more of a little bump. This one goes up and it stayed up, so it wasn't only that, it happened to be coincident that whatever happened with the monitor also seemed to affect the inflation rate of the volcano a little bit. That's really curious. Right there. Here on this part, there's that midday bump again. There it is again. And this one seems like it starts rising before the midday bump. The midday bump makes it a little extra steep right in there, but overall, you should be able to untangle that, and you can see that it's interesting that it's coincident once again. So something to look at there moving forward. It's definitely never going to be a one-to-one thing, but when you have a system that's teetering right on the edge, if it's going to erupt, it's not going to erupt, then maybe these smaller factors, any one of them might be the factor that the last straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak, that allows the eruption to begin. So usually when people ask, do tides affect the volcanoes and eruptions? The answer is usually no. The tidal forces are much, much, much smaller than any of the volcanic forces. But in this instance, when you have it teetering right on the edge, then maybe that tidal force or maybe something else might be that final straw, and that can be something to be interesting at these exact moments. So, all right, that's the last week. Here's earthquakes. They don't really cluster in any way, so we'll just keep moving from there. And we mentioned before how they're distributed in a similar pattern. You still have Pahala deep earthquakes in this sector over here. You have your summit population and your south flank population here. And the south flank is still going. You can see it's happening in the background. Earthquakes are still ongoing. It's hard to tell exactly just by eye, but it does appear to be a little bit slower. And I'm not sure if I'll convince you of this, but something else to keep an eye on here. There are lots of dots on here, but mostly they're smaller dots than usual, and you only have a handful of these larger events that are even themselves only magnitude 2 earthquakes. So look at that more here in a few minutes, but let's come down past the cross section. Here's another depth gauge. Now we're looking at data for the last month. So the depth for the last month isn't giving us really any better resolution on depth. We'll have to wait for some noise to clear. Earthquakes per day over the last month, you can see here, have remained within a predictable range. You do have this sawtooth pattern that seems to coincide with earthquakes building up a little bit more before an episode begins and then dropping off. But that hasn't been quite as clear here recently. And there you see this 1 month long tilt signal with episode 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 all on here. Right? Here's our last week. There's our change in tilt. And maybe if I look further back in time, you can see how there's very many of these little daily wiggles that come in when you start looking. It really snakes in and really present everywhere when you start squinting at it. And for comparison, here is a 1 month tilt at Sand Hill Station to the southwest, which is more sensitive to that. And here you can see them more clearly, these daily variations and how they superimpose upon that. Right? There is depth for time for the whole month. Once again, no real big patterns. If anything, you can match the ramp ups and pauses to the episodes coming on, but sometimes not so clearly either. You can see there and there, it doesn't look quite so clear, like it slowed down very much. Once again there. And so it's pretty sensitive, and it's not changing a whole lot there. So when we zoom out for earthquakes per week, it's even harder to see any change. It looks like all pretty flat, like it's one continuous eruption with very low seismicity ever since the end of December right in here. So for the 1 year Summit GPS, this is a line distance from north to south across Kīlauea caldera. And here you can see the first burst of, I want to say this might have been the first 3 episodes. And then since then you see the build up to each episode, the relief, build up, relief if it lasts long enough, this little sawtooth pattern right in there. Imagine it's pretty small. Let's see if I can make that bigger for you guys to see there. There's that most recent build up to episode 10, to 9, to 8, to 7. I'm not sure if this is 6 or this is 5 in here. I'd have to go back and look, but you can see the pattern there. Overall, it seems to be fairly steady, right? On average, it's fairly flat there. So everything it's gaining is a lot. It's losing. It's like like a seesaw in that state of equilibrium, just teetering one way, then teetering the other way, then teetering one way. So that's the curiosity that we'll see how long will last. At Pu'o'o on the East Rift, we saw this dike intrusion preceding the Nepal eruption in September last year, 2024. Before that, we had seen this contraction of the East Rift. And once that happened, we saw some of this maybe trickle or, injections of lava and movement of that rift zone from that injection happening further to the west. And most of that seems to have settled. You can see that end of December when that eruption begins is somewhere right in here. And since about then, we can see there's actually been more of a consistent decline at the rift zone, Middle East rift line length right here. So you might speculate that it looks similar to that pattern before. The rate might change a little bit here, but it's in the ballpark there, and we'll have to wait to see what actually happens further here. But right now, what's happening as a story is that all the summit activity is relieving all the pressure in the rift zones, and so the rift zones are bought more time until something else changes underground. That's always the wild card. Okay, so over the last 5 years, earthquakes per month, here's how that looks. We've really come down quite a lot since middle of last year when that Middle East rift sequence was ongoing. Earthquakes shifted to the summit, and then now they really died off here in the last month. And GPS over the long term, we're looking at this phase of adjustments here being fairly flat. The long-term pattern really is for the last 5 years of magma coming into this volcano and stretching it apart till it bursts with eruptions there and there and there and there, and here, and finally here once again. So a lot of eruptions in this graph. So they want to come down to these long-term comparisons that we don't often look at, but I showed you guys the earthquake maps for the week and how that might look a little bit light. And for comparison, here is the 1 month earthquakes on Kīlauea on the south flank. Now you can still see there's a good population of earthquakes here on the south flank. There's some around the summit, not that many. There's the Pahala earthquakes there as well, but really not as many also. Lots of small dots and only a few bigger ones. We've seen in the past some weeks that look more populated with earthquakes than this. And this is a whole month of data. So it'll be interesting to see some data from the USGS at some point about earthquakes, like just in the south flank sector, for example, and how they've changed over time as opposed to bucketing everything together as is done here. So for comparison, here's what 1 year looks like on Kīlauea in that same area. So you can see quite a lot of map is obscured by how many earthquakes are occurring. And relatively speaking, this is not quite 1/12 of that, right? It seems to be a little bit below average here. I have heard some reports also from geologists at the conference that we were at last week, suggesting that the south flank motion has slowed considerably in these last 2 months, coincident with this eruption as well, or maybe just before it, perhaps. More details hopefully will come out on that as well. So that is the Kīlauea monitoring. In cross section, just to show you guys, there's one week you don't see a whole lot, and 1 month there you can see the Pahala source, a little bit of that connection, not so much, but all the south flank events showing up right through here. If we go to the 1 year, then it's more clear. Let's zoom into this. 5 years is too much data. You can't really see anything. But for the whole last year, here's all the earthquakes. There's the deep Pahala source. There's this inclined transfer zone, we believe, maybe leads to Kīlauea, and then comes up there. Down here, you have all the flexure of the island underneath these deeper earthquakes underneath all this adjustment above. And then here you see really the whole structure of the island, deeper in the center and shallower towards the edges. And the whole thing lining up with earthquakes as it adjusts and moves, all within this map zone. So everything we see here is relative our island, and this volcano is very dynamic in the first place, and that's how we can say that something like this might look relatively low, even though there's over 1,000 earthquakes plotted on this map right here over the course of 1 month. So that is the monitoring signals. We can go back and look at the USGS notices as well. And I'll just highlight things as usual. We're going to start back on Tuesday, where for several days we had been awaiting another episode to begin. But since I like to reference my sources, here we can see what I want to pull out here is they observed that on the evening of February 16th, there was a change of deflation to inflation. I'm sorry, from inflation to less inflation here. And yeah, that's what they note there, the time and place right there. And if we move to the next day, the daily update comes out a little bit late yesterday on Wednesday in the morning. And they say we're still paused. They still give a 1 to 3 day window there. Here they give some more detail, or did I miss it? Where did I show the, maybe I did miss it back in here where they say the long period signals. Let me see if I can find this. Analysis. No, maybe it was in this update. Oh, somewhere in here it says that there were long period earthquakes that occurred at that time. Here we go. Inflation was interrupted by several long period seismic events that appear to have affected magma in the conduit there. So that was Wednesday midday. And what they had noted was that after that had happened, the magma rate picked back up. And as a result, episode 10 began on Wednesday evening at 8:22 p.m. Fountains from the north vent, which was the only vent to erupt, 300 to 400 feet, 90 to 125 meters high, Early on, it covered lesser part of the crater floor, but that would eventually grow to 3/4. They noted that the inflationary tilt was on a scale of 10 microradians, and ultimately we would drop 6.5 microradians during episode 10 here. So it was a little bit different than the previous pattern. Let's advance to the next text update here, which was the daily update from today that came out at 8:30 in the morning, where you once again have this statement of the height of the fountains once again, unchanged. Although by morning, the heights had dropped down to 150 to 200 feet or 45 to 60 meters by 6:45 a.m. Glow could be seen from the south vent during this episode, but it did not erupt any lava flows. The final update was the one released earlier this morning, but after all the other ones, 9:50 a.m., where they say the episode ended at 9:18 a.m. after just under 13 hours of fountaining, covering 75% of the floor of Halemaʻumaʻu. And there are the tilt statistics. And I think that might have been it in here. Yeah, they actually do not even offer any kind of forecast or bracketing because it was too soon after this ended. That will likely come out in tomorrow's update. So it's really from looking at the graph ourselves, as you can see here, that we can really detect. You can see right there, that's 1 microradian of inflation, and that was about 6 hours after that thing ended or so. So we looked at the tilt already at the summit and elsewhere. So one thing to point out on a tilt, we have not seen any action at Pu'o'o, but there has been weather over the last month, and so here is a very nice rainfall signal. This fin, larger fin with a smaller fin on top of it, is all weather-related impacts here. So just for reference, and we have some movement in Jonica on a small scale there, but unrelated to any earthquake activity. So whatever's happening in there is nothing to really worry about at the present time. So those are our monitoring signals. And once again, just to restate and re-show this timeline there, and it really seems to fall pretty nicely, this 15-hour threshold, if you count this one right there and all the ones below it, they all have fairly short pauses following it. If you look in more detail, episode 6 was also 13 hours long. You look closely here, and you might have been 8 minutes shy of it being 13 hours, perhaps, right? And you come down to our episode 10, and it might be 4 minutes shy of being 13 hours. So technically, it was the second shortest episode here, but pretty much tied for the shortest episode, episodes 6 and 10 at 13 hours each. That episode 6 was followed by a 2-day pause, and we'll wait and see what happens here, right? But if you had to bet right now, if the over-under was, call it 2.5 days, right? And you see that 4 of these that hit under 15 hours of eruption time are all under 2.5 days, and the other 5 are above it, then you might lean one way or the other and take your chances with the volcano following that pattern again or not. Okay, so that is it for the monitoring update. And with that, I can take a break here and pass it to Lou for our community corner. You ready, Lou? All right.
I will bring him in. Thanks, Phil. All right. Hey, Lou. Hey, how's it going? How you doing? All right. I'm good. You caught me right when I was copying and pasting into the chat. Perfect timing. All right, let's take a look at what's going on up top today, shall we? In our community corner, we've already heard the eruption information, but we're going to talk about the park. Has some different things going on right now. The Kīlauea Visitor Center is officially closed, and that includes restrooms and water filling station up there. Road construction is still going on all over the place. Be aware. And the parking lot and overlook closed for Nene protection. It is the Pu'upuai parking lot and overlook. Yellow jackets are still, I think that's just an ongoing thing. Do you remember a time, Dane, that we haven't seen the yellow jacket warning or the wasp warning?
That place is always yellow jacketed out. Even if they didn't put the warning, we'd probably put the warning in.
Right.
Yeah, yellow jackets.
I thought I would share, since some of you might not have seen it, the blueprint drawing here, the sketch of what's coming. It's a 2-year project, and we will be waiting. And I actually see some water bottle filling stations back there. Those will be nice. One thing I wanted to point out, since we have all of these eruptions happening, is everybody goes into the park when it's dark to see these eruptions, and a lot of you come out when it's light and construction's already began. So where you passed in the dark might be different than when you come out. Construction might have set up. So go slow. There are some safety tips. Just follow the posted limits, watch for people crossing the street, and if you're walking around, carry a flashlight. Viewing is all over the park. You can't miss it. Volcano House, Keanakekoi, Koi, Waldron's Ledge, they're everywhere. You can't go wrong right now. And there it is, the Kīlauea Visitor Center restrooms and most adjacent parking are now closed for renovations as of February 17th at 5 p.m. We've been waiting for this day. It got pushed back a few times. So know that the parking will be even tougher right there. The Volcano House has limited parking. Plan to hike a little bit. Right now, you can go all the way up to the overlook, and they have this tent set up there, and that's where you can get your passport stamp. You can get information from a ranger. There's a shot of the bookstore that is cleaned out there. And I thought I had a write-up on, I guess I took that off of there. Nope. That's the Kahuna parking lot. I forgot to mention that. So you drive all the way up there and you can get all your information. Rangers are up there. We do have a happening at the Kahuku Visitor Center. It's a visual storytelling workshop with artist in residence Andres Vera Martinez. And Andres here has quite the Pele graphic there. Andre Vera Martinez, an author, illustrator, and educator, is February's artist in residence, the first of 2025. This is down in the Kahuku unit on February 22nd from 1 to 2:30. It is free. Go check that out. And I threw this in there when I was kind of looking around. I'm a sucker for dinosaur exhibits. And Imi Loa has the Explored Dinosaurs exhibit going on. It's an expedition dinosaur into the deep, a groundbreaking traveling exhibit that explores the fascinating world of prehistoric oceans and their inhabitants. So take a look. They have quite a few days that they're open. They're doing that. Check them out. I have a link in the description, so you can click on that. It'll give you the calendar and all the extra information for tickets and all of that. And if you are not subscribed to our newsletter, it went out at the 1st of February. Those that are subscribed already have it in their inbox. I just posted a link in the chat. If you are not subscribed, you can subscribe to our newsletter. It's the fastest way to get it. It is available on our website at hveri.org. And with that, Dane.
Yeah, let's go ahead and look at. Thank everybody that tuned in today. You know, rely on viewers like you, like subscriptions, shares, all that stuff really does help with the algorithm and getting this out there to more people. So we appreciate you being here. We also like to thank the Puna Strong and Kīlauea Recovery Grants through the County of Hawaii and the Hawaii Community Foundation for all they've done to help support this program, but our other programs as well, the digital resilience and youth development that we do. So appreciate all of them, as well as all of our supporters that have donated. We do take donations if you are so inclined. We do take super chats, but we encourage people to go over to hveri.org/donate and donate there. And we end up keeping a higher percentage that way. And one day we will hit 10,000 subscribers, maybe in 20 years, and then we will have a good way to get money through YouTube. But as of right now, the donate is the best. So
Yeah, what Dane's talking about is we have to hit 10,000 to qualify for YouTube's nonprofit plan, where we get 100% of all donations, where we don't have to split it with them. But we have to have that 10,000. So if you're not subscribed, hit the button.
Yep.
Pass it on. Copy the link. Share us out.
Yep. All right, and I believe that does it. We can go ahead and kick it back to Phil. Appreciate you, Lou, jumping
Right on.
in and going through all this stuff with us.
You got it.
All right. Oh, there we go. I think that's right.
All right. Thanks, guys. Yeah. So I've noticed here that we have had the Volcano Watch actually come out here while we were live.
We did get it
And
posted too, so it is up.
it is up. So yeah, go check this out on our website and Facebook group and elsewhere, YouTube as well, I imagine. So here you can see the article, what happens beneath the surface doesn't always stay beneath the surface. And interestingly, they've updated this graph that shows where the episodes have occurred. So here is all 10 of our episodes and the recharge of the tilt between them. So this is really great because it's hard for us to get a tilt plot that's 2 months long otherwise, unless they produce one and release it for us here. So we can see all 10 episodes on one single graph here. And you can also see the overall pattern of how we really have been overall coming down, seeming to stabilize, but maybe now we're coming down a little more again as far as where the peaks of these are occurring. So that's really fascinating, and there's some other interesting information that's in here as well. I'll skim over the background information here. Here is what's interesting. What information shows us how magma is behaving underground between episodes, essentially recharging. We also have data telling us that surface activity continues even while fountaining is paused. Right? So we've talked about intense tremor before. That's evident while magma is erupting out of the vent there. But they note that even in between eruptive episodes, tremor has remained persistent. The intensity drops significantly between episodes, but continues to exist until the next episode. So that indicates gases continue to be released by the vents, and magma is still near the surface, even if it's not visibly erupting. So that's something that helps us understand when a USGS is saying, okay, well, it's not actually over, we're expecting another episode. It's because they're seeing the tremor persist. They're seeing a switch from the volcano being deflating to when it stops erupting, suddenly starts reinflating. And the fact that that has occurred now 9 times previously leads them to have some confidence in the pattern repeating itself there. So that's a little bit to pull out from this article. I'll let you read the rest of it there, but also really nice to see this updated graphic here. Yeah. Of the tilt. So yeah, that's Volcano Watch this week. I think I will probably save some recap and talk about the eruption or the conference that I was at this past week. It was, I should put the logo on the screen one more time. This caldera forming eruptions at basaltic volcanoes that occurred. Very briefly, it was conveners from Hawaii, but also studying volcanoes that have had collapses, like Bardabunga in Iceland, like volcanoes in the Galapagos, like Miyakajima in Japan. There are lots of examples worldwide of similar eruptions out of the flank of a volcano, La Reunion as well. And so the idea was to get all the scientists together to basically trade stories and see what the patterns might emerge in the big picture here. So I'll leave it at that for now, and just know that there'll be more information coming from that in the future. But lots of good connections and lots of good information being discussed there. Maybe no definitive answers, a lot of preliminary data, which is why I should delay here. But great discussions, and I think a lot of good stuff's coming here. All right, so with that, we'll shift to the last segment that we have here, which is our observations of Kīlauea. over the last week. And to start with, I'll show the USGS photo and video release from today of episode 10. To start, they have this video. So let's play you the video of episode 10. This appears to be taken from that southern rim of the crater there. You can see here on the bottom left, this is the south vent glowing but not erupting, and some lava spatter from the north vent coming over the rim and building that spatter and cinder cone. You can see that outflow channel that moves more quickly here, and lots of gas being generated here as well. You see splashing up and onto the edges.
Is this early in the eruption or late in the eruption, the beginning or the end? Because we've had low fountaining at both ends of it.
Not quite clear. I can come back to the.
It was at 8 p.m., so I was guessing it would be darker than that. I guess that would be early this morning as it was shutting off. That one, I don't know though. I can go look. I'll go look.
Yeah, I can check it out too, but I'm not going to interrupt the video here. I'll wait for it to wrap it up, and then I can come back to the page. And we can see. Well, there you can really see. It's hard to really judge the scale of this thing. So there's no trees or people standing there. Wouldn't survive, of course, but it's hard to see how tall that actually is, right? So to remind you, they were saying that it might have been 100 to 200 feet tall at that later part there. So let's come back to the main page here. Here's the caption. Let's see this. I see when an episode started and when it ended. It doesn't say exactly when this was taken, but there's the average fountain heights with the frequent pulses. So, all right, we'll just move on from that and show you some of these other images here. There is the
sunrise.
Survey. This is the sunrise crew, this particular photograph here. You can see that glowing vent and flows spreading across the crater floor here. So this was, you can see that by the extent of lava on the crater floor was at the end of the dark window there. Here is another survey and another view of episode 10. There, a little bit broader angle with more flows visible on the crater floor. Telephoto view of that north vent erupting. So this looks like where that video came from. Let's see what this says. Does not say.
They did say it says sunrise on the video.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah, sunrise.
Very nice.
Great shots. I mean, they got that. What is that? Blue hour. Golden hour, blue hour. I don't know when it's photogenic in the morning or in the afternoon. And here is a scientist checking on one of the webcams. It's looking in there. You can see that they note in the caption. I'm going to come back to the caption here that those high fountains make infrastructure in this area subject to the occasional volcanic bomb strike and may also experience intense heat. So there they are wearing safety gear, checking things out, and being in there only when it's safe to be there and to check things out and not risk themselves also for lava falling from the air. So the fountains in this image died down only an hour after the photograph was taken, so it was clearly waning. That's when they went to go and check on things. That's one of those temporary cameras, not the live stream one, yeah?
Is it? I'm not sure. Yeah, temporary deployed camera, it says, yeah.
Temporary deployed, right.
Yeah.
They did have some adjusting that live cam last night when the eruption started to reframe, and I think they were doing that remotely, I would guess.
Right. Yeah, so this one may not be shooting live, right? But like, for example, we saw during the Mauna Loa eruption, after the fact, we had lots of other web cameras that were released after the fact that were not making to the website. I would imagine this is something like that. Yeah, so there's a great set of images that captures a little bit of episode 10 here. And now we can come to the current live stream. Yeah, let's put this in big mode there. Just degassing in between. So even now with the gas coming out, am I frozen? Must have been frozen there. All right, so even now in between episodes, you see quite a bit of gas coming out. So they're estimating 1,000 tons per day during the pauses, as opposed to what might be regular background of 100 tons per day otherwise before all this began. So that remains our current threat. We can show you guys some of these time-lapse clips. So there's the V1 camera that, if we come to the very beginning, it's zoomed in, as Dane was saying. It had to be readjusted, so you can see it adjusts and zooms out there, but when it plays, you can see the flows coming across the crater floor, wrapping all the way around over here. And then as a fountain shuts off, you still see some movement occurring and resurfacing, overturning of the actual flow field all through here. I'll play it one more time. Yeah, so there's that fountain. Flow stops, and you see some last movements of lava and overturning there within the lava lake area. So backing up, this is a KP camera up at Mauna Loa, on Mauna Loa Road, looking back at Kīlauea, which is back in here. So there's the glow, the burst of gas and lava. Here comes the moon. And then sunrise, weather clears out and eruption stops and the gas plume dies off considerably as well. So short and sweet there. And that's what's really reducing the impact of our gas. Coming to the K2 camera, this is on the Uikahuna Bluff on that former HVO radio tower. And you guys saw some of this last week, but there's another burst and view of the fountain and glow from the edge of the crater. Uikahuna is a little bit blocked. Here's the overlook where people are standing. It's a little bit blocked by this cliff to see the fountain directly, but great views of the glow. And further over this way towards Kīlauea Overlook, you do get some better views. But from Volcano House area or from the South Kanikakoi, views people were getting are more similar to this. This is now the B1 camera, so it's a little bit further view, but showing what you might see with your eye. It might look something like this. At that far end of the crater, you see the fountain erupting and feeding that flow that's coming towards you across this great gulf of the caldera. So we'll play that one more time as well. B1 camera. And there it is. It's kind of washed out there by the brightness of the glow and the darkness of night. But it's telling us what's happening and where, which is good enough in this case. Another view of what this might look like. This is the National Park camera, Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. That's at the Volcano House. So here's Uikahuna Bluff up here in the distance. That was a sunset flash, and there is eruption happening off in this far left corner of this camera. Pretty tiny over there, so what I'll do is I'll put it back. Let's zoom in to way over there so you can get a better view of that, what came up on the Volcano House. The fountain, you see the flow is starting to march towards the camera a little bit. And then the camera cuts out there before dawn. Let's see a few more. Here's the S2 camera, this more full frontal view of South Cone, North Cone. So let's play this for you guys. Both glowing, bursts out of the North Cone, floods over, shuts off, and the crust continues moving a little bit. It might be interesting to know when this thing first comes out, that first burst leaves a maximum extent all the way over here, and then the next flow comes in a little bit less, and then it comes in a little bit less, and then it surges forward again and resurfaces. So watch that as I play it one more time here for you guys. It comes out there as that maximum extent, it recedes, comes back, lapping on, overturning, shuts off, and starts draining down, and then overturning there at the very end. Some interesting views here. Here's a KW camera from above once again. So this shows us the vent activating and shooting these tall fountains here, sending this sinuous flow down on the crater floor, and shutting off with some still movement occurring all the way down to here, and it finally shuts off within the last few hours, but with still some overturning lava pads emerging. So if you've missed the fountains and you're up in a park tonight, you'll likely still see some lava and some glow, but it won't be exactly the same as what it was shooting out of the hole like it was last night. We'll play that one more time. And one thing that I like to notice is here's a landscape before that fountain. And so there's a little bit of this upper bowl, maybe, for lack of a better term right there, where this upper area of ponding. And lava seems to often cascade down into this lower bowl area right through here. There's another area of ponding kind of right through here. Now it seems to flow downhill over this way as well. And so you see the cascade kind of comes first into here, then spilling over to there, and then spilling over to there. So that's something to look at as we replay it one more time here as well. And those rapids occurring at those break in the slope. Also, this initial burst tends to flow off this direction, which dies off. It's too high, but this other flow persists much longer here at the bottom. I'll put more time since I like it. Tall fountains. Pretty incredible how quickly it spreads across this last burst of area over here as well. So, very striking eruption. All right, so let's look at the thermal view of that same field of view. This is an F1 camera. So before the eruption, just some glowing cracks. Here comes the burst. That first flow that shuts off. That larger flow wrapping around and filling all the way to the edge of the crater. And at the very end, we see an ooze-up flow there at the back side. And so this is something we've seen in previous eruptions as well. The lava may be migrating underneath the crust or through some tubes somehow to emerge over here. So we did see that. And so we'll look into that a little bit more. Clearly it got there right there, but did the crust really lift up, or is it finding some tube and moving through without there? So we'll look at the B2 camera last. This is the one that's closest to that crater floor. And let's play this here. This is just this eruption from last night. Getting dark. And there's the burst. And here come the flows spreading across the crater. Towards the camera a little bit. And that's it for the daytime. So you don't see a whole lot there, but let me show you guys the full eruption. So I'm going to go back here to the 20th of December. And what the crater floor looked like before this eruption. Here's all that mineral deposit, sulfur and gypsum, all that kind of stuff, all through here. I'm going to play this fast at the point, and I've made this only daytime views, so you don't have to see the flashing of nighttime. And we're looking at this crater floor rising up over this last 8 weeks or so. So when we play it, there it is. There's the first couple flows. You can see it bursts up with each different pulse. And now it's looping. And see how it comes up and a couple pulses at first, and then a little bit of slower injections later on. And just to show you how much the crater floor has risen over this time. And so the foreground is really the most striking thing at first. But let me do this. Let me zoom in all the way over here to this fountains. So you can get a sense of looking at this back crater wall, right? The distance of the slope down to that original depth. Where the flow starts somewhere down in there. And how much it's come up visually. And then also the cones are interesting, right? The cones, when they start off down under here, underneath the current ground level, and then have actually built up on this rising crust too. You can see that more clearly in this video here. And especially over here on this left side, look at this slope that comes down. How much that thing's buried over the last 2 months here. Pretty impressive to see it at this speed. How much change has occurred. Right, and this is because of lava injecting underneath this crust. Well, some of these frames early on are the flow is actually coming over top of the ground, but some of these later ones where you see this cracking in the foreground, especially, it's the lava injecting underneath that upper crustal layer enough to swell up the whole crater floor. So all that said, let's come back now to the B2 camera, and now I've started it. Let's come back to it's going to end today, but I'm going to start this, pause it, and then start it. Okay, so I'm going to start this here on the 12th, which is the last episode, episode 9. This is towards the tail end of episode 9 here. So as this plays, you'll see the injection of lava underneath the crust that accompanies episode 9. So that did happen in the last episode last week. There you see it kind of swelling up. And now I'm playing the whole rest of the week since then, up until today. It's still coming. And that was it. And if you did not see anything change, it's because nothing changed during this phase, during this episode. And so unlike episode 9 and 8 and 7, some of the other ones we've seen, we have not seen lava injected under the crust in front of this camera right here this time around. Maybe because it was a little bit smaller. In any case, you can see the clear change of episode 9. There is a swelling. and episode 10 here, well, there's nothing. So that puts us back to this timeline, and well, maybe we're in this range of nothing's in it, or something else will come within the next few days, because we did not relieve extra pressure even by lava injecting underneath the crust as well, right? So there's less lava being accommodated overall, so the recharge could go faster. So it all seems consistent here, but those are our nuances, and we're trying to tie these pieces together where maybe there is more complexity in between there, and we're just looking at what there is. So those are our time lapses from this week. I'd like to reload the USGS page here that shows all the different cameras. So I'm gonna come to the top here. There's their S2 current views with the gas, KW current views. We're actually kind of seeing some of the lava surface seems to have receded, and we're seeing more of these almost like a perched levee walls in various areas around there, right? After the lava drains and oozes out some more. And there's our thermal camera. We still have that ooze up flow occurring on the eastern edge of the flow field. And here's the VI camera, V1 camera. We zoom back in, showing no lava on the channel and just gas coming out. Right, oh, nice. Here's our B1 camera, and B1 is actually showing this ooze breakout a little better here. Right in there. And the B2 is farther off the screen there. Gas visible from the tower still, with some regular clouds blowing by. Maybe a little extra thermal effect happening as the atmosphere is cooling here in the evening. So those are our current web cameras, and that's the observations to share of Kīlauea this week. So we're ready for any discussion and questions, Dane, whatever we got, and we can wrap it up here.
I'm muted. There we go. All right. So we really didn't have that many come through in terms of questions. If anybody does have a question, go ahead and get it in the chat at this point. We're talking mostly about roads that I don't think are impacted by the lava, or the current activity. And then, yeah, there's, so let's just see if we can get some questions to come in, because they're going through the chat again. And one question was, how long has it been erupting for? Well, since, what was it, the 23rd of December?
Yeah, that's about 8 weeks, I want to say. Something like that. Might be 7.5, maybe not quite 8. So
I will take this time to thank Don for his $5 donation. Many alohas, and remember, tomorrow is Pizza Friday. Appreciate it there, Don. Continued support. And Don asks, how many meters did the lava lake rise since the eruption began? Ballpark.
Yeah, so let's see here. If I can come back to our map, let me figure out where I put my map. It's all the way up here. All right, so February 3rd, we had at that point 108 feet of maximum thickness, or 33 meters. And then if we come to our graph over here, that was February 3rd, we said, right? So let's see what the best we can get here with elevation. This is 1 week, so we really got to go back to the last month. February 3rd was right in there. Looks like we're right underneath at 950. Yeah, it's really hard to tell with this graph in here, right? But you're looking, I would say no more than another 10 meters, something like that. So if we take that and add it to our map, maybe you're in a range of 30 to 40 meters to be a little more generous, right? Maybe 100 to 130 feet-ish, something like that is the maximum thickness. So that's the best we can do. That's uneven across the whole crater floor, of course. That's likely an area over here, closer to the vent. But as we've seen, that other camera, that B2 is down in here-ish, looking at this area. So we know that even over here, this area has also been rising up by different amounts each time, right? Like, for example, it's episode 10. There was no injection and there was no flow in that area. So that area did not thicken this time. but it did the last time. And that's where it gets tricky to figure out exactly how high everything is within this large landscape all through here. So there was another question that came through, Dane. I'm not sure if we have it to put up on a board here, but there's someone asking about what exactly is the downdrop block. And we can point that out here on this map too. So in 2018, the area that collapsed at the summit that accompanied the eruption in Lower Puna was this area outlined here. Right, that's basically a new crater within our larger caldera, which is this wall over here that's been around since, about 1500 or so, we'll call it. To be very roughly accurate there. There's a whole larger caldera. So in 2018, we had this area within it actually collapse right there. And within that pit, there was a deeper pit right through here that has now been entirely filled in. And this area over here to the side, this little bay almost, this is the downdrop block. This area that collapsed within this larger crater, but not as far as that inner pit. So there's a larger crater, there's our downdrop block, and our inner pit of Halemaʻumaʻu would have been in here. So right now, lava has covered that inner pit and is flowing onto the downdrop block area over here. This looks kind of flattish on this map, but there's a slope that goes from higher on this side and it goes downhill this way, right? So this thing is it's like a wave coming onto the beach is having to lap further and further on shore to kind of cover that area, like the tide coming in, for example. And there are parts of high ground that are not getting covered all through there. So right now, there's plenty of room for lava to flow in the downdrop block and be within this collapsed pit all through here. They can keep doing that for likely another few years before it were to spill out onto the main caldera floor, which is over here. And at that point in time, it would still be within a big hole without any access to infrastructure, but it would have recovered the collapse volume from 2018. And I'd have to go back to my spreadsheet to check, but at most recent calculations were somewhere between 25 and 30% of the volume loss in 2018 recovered by eruption. So I think we're probably closer to 30, I'd say, somewhere in that range there. Mm-hmm. That's volume, right? Not height, which in height we've recovered most of the way there, actually. Now I'd say we're probably over 80%, something like that. We're probably still missing 250 feet-ish, something like that, to get to the same point, right? That's 70-ish meters, something like that, more or less, is about what we might be missing to get back to the previous crater floor. But we have to cover not just the inner pit, but all the way across to all this downdrop block area, which is why this phrase comes up a lot about the downdrop block.
All right. We got one more question. Go ahead and cue that one up. Catherine asks, how does all this activity affect Mauna Loa? Thanks, guys.
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't really know the answer is the short and sweet of it there. But we can watch Mauna Loa and see that she's not reacting in any major way right now. I think there are ways volcanoes do lean on each other. So like when one is filling and pressurized, it can squeeze the other one more. So it takes more for the other one to overcome that. It still can do that. But it's changing the surroundings of each volcano, if the other one is pressing on it or not. So there is that aspect of it. And there are some other potential connections of pressure from the hotspot up to each volcano. So like when it's erupting, it can kind of reduce pressure from the system pulling from the other one and maybe make it less likely for it to erupt. That seems to be a pattern long term, that when one volcano erupts, the other one is less likely to erupt. It's not always a hard and fast rule, but big picture patterns over thousands of years, that seems to be the case. So clearly they do affect each other. It's hard to say exactly one way or like how and what and when necessarily. There's a lot of variables there. So the long and short of it is right now we're seeing maybe Mauna Loa seems to be uplifting a little bit more, but that's all within a larger pattern of it was doing that already anyways, and for independent reasons, and it maybe is just changing its rate a little bit because of that now. So that's the best discussion I can offer at this point. But this is a topic that comes up again and again, and you may see it in some of our other streams discussing this in various levels of detail.
Right. The interesting thing for me on that whole thing is one of the things you mentioned earlier about potentially the south flank locking up. And we talked about how south flank drives the car on a lot of things. And if it's locking up, that creates some interesting dynamics potentially. But it's all early stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we'd have to think about why is it locking up? Is it locking up because it's driven fast enough? It's time for a rest stop. It's still driving. Nothing's really changed. It's just taking a little break, right? And one support for that would be the fact that we just had a Nepal eruption. The Nepal eruption may be as important to this whole story as anything else. The Nepal eruption, we've learned, actually fits exactly within a pattern. There's a cycle on that Middle East rift of the south flank moving, allowing the rift to open, and allowing intrusions or eruptions to happen on a 14-year cycle. So it turns out the Nepal eruption arrived within a week of that cycle, which suggests it was really the south flank that was actually doing the driving in that case. And of course, the magma was available at the summit to come into that area and cause an eruption. And maybe an eruption versus an intrusion is part of the priming of the system as well. But it does seem like the south flank was in charge there, if that interpretation is correct. And in that case, you might say, okay, well, it's after you have one of these big events, then you've done a lot of work, you can rest and recover that before you pick it up back again. So it could just be that. We've seen the slow earthquake patterns pick up and slow down and pick up and slow down. Now they're not happening since 2018. There's, that's one point of view there. Or you could say, well, something else has changed entirely, and the south flank is just along for the ride, and that means that the summit could pressurize, and now it can actually not have as much space, and that could lead to something else, right? So, so interesting how this all seems to fit, right? Why are we having the first series of episodic eruptions in Kīlauea summit since 2018? Maybe it's got to do with this. Maybe it's because the south flank is actually recovering from that Nepal eruption still, to allow it to stay locked, to allow it to become episodic, because the equilibrium is so finely balanced and tuned at this point in time. There's a lot of questions, and really that's why we like to have discussions to really educate about what the actual factors are, because in the end, the real nailed down solution is so specific to any one moment in time that it's more useful to know what the patterns are overall, right? Our whole mission here is to educate ourselves to be better prepared for any eruption and its hazards. And talking about the range of hazards, I think, is more useful than saying it's absolutely going to be this exact one thing or that exact one thing. It's more like, here's all the things that could possibly happen. And yeah, kind of leave it at that.
All right. Well, yeah, we got through it. We get these weekly eruptions. Been making the streams pretty dedicated to just, recapping what happened over the past week, as opposed to the deep dives that we were doing before. It's refreshing. It's kind of cool, to have something new to talk about every week.
Yeah, well, we've managed to do that anyways for 6 years now. So I think we never run out of things to talk about, but it definitely livens things up when there's a lot of pretty lava pictures that are all new and
right,
and they're coming from our viewers and not just from the USGS and ourselves as well. So that's really more exciting when the community is able to engage more so, because it's all out in the open for everyone to contribute. And it's trickier when it's all underground and all you see are earthquakes and earthquake maps, and then we fill that role a little more, right, to help explain what the USGS is putting out.
Yeah, and it's nice with the eruptions like this one where the hazard is gas and sometimes Pele's hair, and the difficulties people are encountering are it's hard time finding a parking spot to take the photos from. That's the good problems to have with the volcano, and we'll take them as long as we can get them, those good eruptions, so to speak.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for joining us this week. We'll be back at our regular time next week, Thursday, 5 p.m. Hawaiian time, unless something else happens in a major disruptive way between now and then. That would not include episode 11 if it's just happening at the summit, but if there were to be something changing in a rift zone, for example, that would be something that we would then consider more alarming, right, and out of the regular pattern here. So yeah, our mission is to really improve preparedness through education. So hopefully we've done a little bit of that today for you guys. As we keep repeating, please like, share, and subscribe. That really helps us get to those more productive relationships with our social media providers, right? So we can maximize our output here. So, all right. Anything else, Dane?
I think that's it. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Gary and Dano.
All right. Thanks to our ASL interpreters as always.
Lou on the back end.
Blue on the back end. And until next week, from Hawaii Tracker and the nonprofit HVERI, Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, we have Dano and Carrie Kaufman, Dane DuPont. I'm Philip Ong. Aloha, everyone.